My daughter whispered, "We need to leave, look under the table." During Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Riverside, my daughter Aria whispered urgently, "Mom, we need to leave now. You didn't look under the table." At first, I thought she was being dramatic. Aria had always been my cautious one, the type to check locks twice and notice things others missed. But when I glanced at her face, my stomach dropped. She was pale, frozen, like she'd stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. The dining room buzzed with typical Henderson family chaos. My father carved the pot roast while my mother fussed over whether anyone wanted more mashed potatoes. My sister Claire picked at her green beans, complaining about her latest drama with her ex-husband Derek. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Aria's grip on my arm tightened. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" I whispered back, trying to keep my voice light. My husband Robert was deep in conversation with Dad about the upcoming football season, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between Aria and me. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes darted toward the heavy oak dining table that had been in the Henderson family for 3 generations. My heart began to race before I even understood why. Something about her expression, pure terror mixed with determination, made my hands shake. I bent down slowly, my knees protesting after a long week at the courthouse. I work as a prosecutor for the district attorney's office in Riverside County, handling high-profile criminal cases that often put dangerous people behind bars. My job had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Under the table, wedged near the carved leg like someone had tried to hide it in plain sight, was a small folded piece of paper. The cream-colored stationery looked familiar, my grandmother's expensive writing paper that Mom still kept in the antique secretary desk. I reached for it, but Aria's hand shot out faster than lightning, snatching the note before my fingers could touch it. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it just enough to glimpse the contents. Whatever she saw made her face go white as fresh snow. "We're leaving," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the clatter of silverware and family chatter. "Right now, Mom. Please." The urgency in her voice cut through me like a blade. Aria wasn't the type to panic or create drama. At 26, she'd inherited my analytical mind and my father's steady nerves. If she said we needed to leave, there was a reason. But what could possibly be written on that note that would terrify my composed, intelligent daughter? We left without ceremony, without explanation, without the usual Henderson family ritual of lingering goodbyes and packed leftovers. I mumbled something about a sudden migraine to Robert, who immediately understood and started gathering our coats. My husband knew my work stress sometimes triggered debilitating headaches, so he didn't question it. "Leaving so soon?" Mom called from the kitchen, but she didn't look up from loading the dishwasher. Dad grunted from his recliner, already absorbed in the evening news. Claire was texting furiously, probably complaining to her friends about Derek again. Nobody seemed to notice our abrupt departure, or if they did, they didn't care enough to investigate. The October air bit sharp against my cheeks as we hurried to our Honda Pilot. Aria clutched that note like it might explode, her knuckles white against the cream-colored paper. Robert started the engine while I slid into the passenger seat, my mind racing with possibilities. What had my daughter discovered? What was on that note? I asked the moment our driveway came into view. Our modest 2-story home in the Canyon Hill subdivision had never looked more welcoming, its warm yellow porch lights promising safety and answers. Aria hesitated, staring at the folded paper like it contained state secrets. Finally, she held it up with shaking fingers and whispered, "It's my password." "Your what?" I blinked hard, certain I'd misheard. "My work password," she repeated, her voice hollow. "For my account at Morrison Webb & Associates." My blood turned to ice water. Aria worked as a paralegal at one of Riverside's most prestigious law firms, handling sensitive family court cases and custody disputes. She was meticulous about security protocols, never wrote down passwords, never shared access codes, never compromised client confidentiality. "Aria, that's impossible. You never write down your—" "It's written in Grandma Henderson's handwriting," she interrupted, her words tumbling out in a rush. Those big, loopy letters from all the birthday cards and grocery lists. I'd recognize that cursive anywhere. The world tilted sideways. Grandma Henderson had been dead for 8 years. Even if she were alive, how could she possibly know Aria's current work password? And why would someone forge her handwriting to write it down? I don't understand, I whispered, but even as the words left my mouth, pieces of a terrible puzzle began clicking into place. How could they possibly? They watched me, Mom, Arya said quietly. They had to have watched me log in somehow. By the time we reached home, Arya was already pulling out her laptop, her face set in hard lines that reminded me of myself during particularly difficult prosecutions. She'd inherited my determination along with my analytical mind, and right now, both were focused like a laser beam on that computer screen. I wanted to ask a dozen questions, but something about her expression warned me to stay quiet. Robert made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, watching us both with concerned eyes. He'd learned over 23 years of marriage that when the Henderson women got that look, it was best to let them work. Arya's fingers flew over her keyboard, accessing her work account with practiced efficiency. I watched her face change as she navigated through system logs and security records, her expression growing darker with each click. This is bad, she finally said, her voice flat and cold. Really bad. She turned the laptop screen toward me, pointing at a series of entries in what looked like an access log. Date, time, user ID, and file names marched down the screen in neat columns. Most of it looked routine: case files, court documents, client communications. But one entry made my heart stop. Someone used my account yesterday at 1:47 p.m. to access a sealed custody file, Arya explained, her prosecutor's training evident in her methodical presentation of evidence. Case number FC 2024-1159. Derek Whitman versus Claire Henderson Whitman. Derek Whitman. My sister's ex-husband. The man she'd been complaining about all through dinner, the source of her endless legal troubles and restraining order violations. You weren't even assigned to that case, I whispered, the implications crashing over me like a cold wave. Exactly. I had no legitimate reason to access Derek's file. None. But according to this log, I downloaded the entire custody agreement, including his current address and workplace information. She scrolled down, showing me more entries. Someone also accessed his financial records and the psychological evaluation reports. My mind reeled. Yesterday at 1:47 p.m., Arya had been at lunch with my parents at Romano's Italian Bistro downtown. I knew because she texted me a picture of their famous lasagna, complaining that Grandpa Henderson was telling his World War II stories again. They invited you to lunch so someone could use your laptop, I said slowly, the terrible truth crystallizing. While you were out with Mom and Dad, someone was here, in your apartment, using your computer. Arya nodded grimly. And they were sloppy about it. They didn't know the system tracks everything, every file accessed, every document downloaded, every search performed. It's all here, time-stamped and tagged to my user account. But there was something else, something that made her hands shake as she scrolled through the records. Mom, she whispered, they didn't just look at Derek's information. They printed it. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood as we drove back to my parents' house in Riverside. Arya sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching a manila folder containing printouts of the security logs. She'd spent half the night documenting every unauthorized access, every privacy violation, every piece of evidence that would clear her name and expose the truth. You don't have to do this, I told her as we pulled into the familiar driveway. The same red brick ranch house where I'd grown up, where family dinners had once meant safety and love instead of betrayal and theft. Yes, I do, she replied firmly. They used me, Mom. They put my career at risk, my reputation, my entire future. And for what? So Claire could stalk her ex-husband. My parents were in the garden when we arrived, Dad trimming his prized rose bushes while Mom deadheaded the chrysanthemums. They looked up with identical expressions of surprise and mild annoyance, as if we were interrupting something important. Back so soon? Mom asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. I thought you had that migraine. Arya didn't waste time with pleasantries. She marched across the lawn, her heels clicking against the flagstone path, and stopped directly in front of them. You used me, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood. You took me to lunch yesterday so someone could break into my work account. Dad's pruning shears froze mid-cut. Mom's hands stilled among the flowers. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic on Riverside Drive. Arya, honey, what are you talking about? Mom's voice held that familiar tone of patronizing concern she'd perfected over the years. You're being dramatic. Am I? Arya opened her folder and pulled out the security logs. Because I have proof. Date, time, file names, everything. While I was eating lasagna and listening to Grandpa's war stories, someone was using my computer to access confidential legal files. Dad finally moved, crossing his arms over his chest in that defensive posture I remembered from childhood arguments. Now hold on. Derek Whitman's custody file, Arya continued relentlessly. His current address, his workplace, his financial records, his psychological evaluations. All of it downloaded and printed using my account, my credentials, my professional reputation. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Then Mom sighed, that tired, disappointed sound she'd made whenever I'd caught her in a lie as a teenager. Claire just needed to know where he was living, she said finally, as if that explained everything. She has a right to know about her children's father. She has a restraining order against him. Arya's voice rose, her professional composure finally cracking. She's legally prohibited from contacting him or going anywhere near him. But my parents just stared at her, blank and uncomprehending, as if they couldn't understand why she was making such a fuss. You don't understand, Mom said, her voice taking on that martyred tone she used whenever someone challenged her decisions. Claire is suffering. Her children need their father, and she deserves to know what he's saying about her in court. I stepped forward, my prosecutor's instincts kicking in. That file was sealed by court order. The information in it is confidential, protected by attorney-client privilege and privacy laws. What you did wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. Dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. It's just paperwork, Laurel. You're both overreacting. Just paperwork? Arya's voice went dangerously quiet. This is my career. My professional license. My entire future. And you risked all of it so Claire could violate her restraining order. She's my daughter, Mom snapped, finally showing her true colors. She comes first. Before your job, before your reputation, before whatever happens to you. The words hit like physical blows. I watched Arya's face crumple, then harden into something I'd never seen before, cold, furious resolve. Where's Claire now? She asked quietly. My parents exchanged glances. She's visiting friends, Dad said carefully. Which friends? Arya pressed. Because if she used that information to contact Derek or go near his house, she's violated her restraining order. That's a felony. She could go to prison. Mom's face went white. She wouldn't, she's using the address from Derek's file, isn't she? I interrupted. That's why you needed it. That's why you were willing to steal from your own granddaughter. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Finally, Dad nodded reluctantly. She drove to Oceanside this morning, he admitted. She wanted to see where the kids were living, make sure they were okay. Oceanside was a 2-hour drive south. If Claire was there now, confronting Derek at his home address, she'd already violated the restraining order. The police would be called. Arrests would be made. And it would all trace back to Arya's compromised account. You have to call her, I said urgently. Tell her to leave immediately before. Dad's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face went grey. It's Claire, he whispered. But when he answered, it wasn't Claire's voice we heard. It was a police officer, calling from the Oceanside County Jail. Ma'am, I need to speak with Claire Henderson's family, the officer's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Dad had reluctantly put it on speakerphone when Arya threatened to call the police herself if he didn't. This is her father, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. Your daughter has been arrested for violating a restraining order. She was found at 1247 Ocean View Drive in Oceanside, attempting to force entry into the residence of Derek Whitman. Mr. Whitman called 911 when he saw her in his driveway. Mom sank onto the garden bench, her face white as the late blooming roses. Is she hurt? Is she? She's unharmed but currently in custody. Bail has been set at $50,000. You'll need to contact a criminal defense attorney. After the officer hung up, we stood in terrible silence. The consequences of my parents' actions were spreading like ripples in a pond, touching everyone they reached. I have to report this, Arya said quietly. The security breach, the unauthorized access, all of it. My firm needs to know their systems were compromised. You can't, Mom pleaded. It'll ruin Claire. She'll go to prison. She's already going to prison, I said harshly. This is her third restraining order violation. The judge warned her last time that the next incident would result in felony charges. But Aria was already on her phone, dialing the emergency number for Morrison, Webb and Associates. She spoke in crisp, professional tones, reporting the security breach and requesting an immediate investigation. She explained the unauthorized access, the compromised files, the chain of events that led to Claire's arrest. Yes, sir, she said into the phone. I understand. I'll be in your office within the hour. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. They're launching a full investigation, she told us. Internal security, IT forensics, the works. They need to determine if any other files were compromised, if client confidentiality was breached, if the firm faces any liability. What about you? I asked gently. I'm suspended pending the investigation. But Mr. Morrison believes my story. The timestamps prove I was with you during the breach. He's more concerned about how someone gained physical access to my apartment. Dad looked confused. How could they? The spare key, I said suddenly, the final piece clicking into place. Mom has Aria's spare key. The one she insisted on keeping for emergencies. Aria stared at her grandmother, her face a mask of betrayal. You gave them my key. It wasn't a question. We all knew the truth now. 3 weeks later, the investigation was complete. Aria sat across from me at our kitchen table, a letter from Morrison, Webb and Associates spread between us. Her hands were steady now, her voice calm as she read the conclusions aloud. Internal investigation confirms unauthorized access to client files on October 15th between 1:30 and 2:15 p.m. Security footage from the apartment complex shows Claire Henderson entering and leaving the building during that time frame, using a key to access Unit 237. The letter continued with clinical precision. Employee Aria Martinez has been cleared of all wrongdoing. Digital forensics confirm she was off-site during the breach. Full employment benefits and professional standing have been restored. The firm extends its apologies for any distress caused during the investigation. They're also implementing new security protocols, Aria added. Multi-factor authentication, encrypted keycards, regular password rotations. What happened to me won't happen to anyone else. I felt a mix of pride and sadness watching my daughter. She'd handled the entire ordeal with grace and professionalism, but I could see the cost in the shadows under her eyes, the careful way she now locked her apartment door, the distance she maintained from family gatherings. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom. The messages had been coming daily for weeks, pleas for forgiveness, explanations that made no sense, promises that things would be different. I deleted this one without reading it, just like all the others. Any word on Claire's case? I asked. Aria nodded grimly. Felony stalking, violation of a restraining order, breaking and entering. Her lawyer is trying to work out a plea deal, but the prosecutor, your old colleague Janet Morrison, isn't interested in bargaining. Claire will likely serve 18 months minimum. And Mom and Dad? The court added them to the official record as hostile third parties. No visitation rights with Claire's children, no contact permitted with Derek or his family. They're essentially banned from any involvement in the custody proceedings. It was a harsh but fair consequence. My parents had chosen to prioritize Claire's obsession over everyone else's safety and well-being. Now they faced the legal and personal ramifications of that choice. I thought about the note under the table, written in Grandma Henderson's forged handwriting. Someone, probably Claire, had practiced that distinctive cursive until they could replicate it perfectly. They'd planned the entire scheme, the lunch invitation, the apartment break-in, the file theft. They'd been willing to destroy Aria's career, risk felony charges, and violate client confidentiality, all to feed Claire's unhealthy fixation on her ex-husband. Do you regret it? I asked Aria. Reporting them, I mean. She considered the question seriously, then shook her head. They had access to everything, Mom. My apartment, my computer, my professional life. They used my trust, my love for family, as a weapon against me. If I hadn't found that note, if I hadn't investigated the breach, I could have lost everything. She was right. My parents had wanted control, wanted access to information they had no right to possess. They'd gotten it too, until Aria's sharp eyes spotted that folded paper under the table. I sent them one final message before I blocked their numbers, I told her. I said, "Don't ever contact my daughter again. You've lost that right." Aria reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for believing me. For supporting me through all of this. Always," I promised. Family should protect each other, not prey on each other. Outside, autumn was giving way to winter. The leaves on our oak tree had turned gold and red, reminding me that seasons change, that time moves forward whether we're ready or not. Some relationships end in betrayal and loss. Others grow stronger through adversity. My parents had made their choice when they put that note under the table. Now Aria and I had made ours. We were done looking backward.